All right, folks, we'll get going now. We're going to continue in our summer series, Summer of Songs series. So this summer has been a tour of the millennia of songs. We've had Gregorian chants, we've had classical music, I'm not sure what last week's song was characterized as, like 80s punk, maybe it was 90s punk, and everything in between. It has been a really fun summer series in that we're taking songs, some of them kind of a bit outside of the Christian usual repertoire, and introducing them as kind of a platform for how people can engage God through musical worship. So this morning, I'm going to continue in the less usual way. So we're going to be, as you can see up there, one of my favorite bands of all time, U2, a song I still haven't found what I'm looking for. Jesus talks about in the Bible, or the Bible records in John, that Christians are to be in the world but not of the world. So this kind of bridges, this common saying kind of bridges out from Jesus' teaching in John, where he says, my prayer is that you do not take them out of the world, but you protect them from the evil one. They are not of the world, even as I am not of it. Sanctify them by a truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, I have sent them into the world. For them I sanctify myself, that they too may be truly sanctified. Obviously, people of faith are encouraged to engage the world using their gifts and their abilities, empowered by the Holy Spirit, to help to build the kingdom, right? Like that shouldn't be, yes. Okay, that's a foundational truth. How one goes about that is frankly quite different. There are some who take an approach I would call it Christian bunkering. They kind of live in a fully Christian world where their friends are all Christians. All the content they engage with is fully sanitized Christian, and they live in a very safe space. There's others who live, I would call the other end of the pendulum, what I call like an untethered approach to the Christian walk, and where there's really not that much differentiation between them and those who are not followers of Jesus, and they kind of live in this world that grace will abound plentifully at some point. And so those kind of two ends of the spectrum of how Christians can live out their lives. Obviously, neither is really the right way, or not, frankly, kind of really not that biblical. It's kind of more in the middle. And is there a specific point on that pendulum? Well, no, not really. You want to live a life, as we kind of talked about this fall, as one that honors and sanctifies, a sanctified life that pursues holiness, and that it does that in a way that is meaningful to the world around you. The arts, and I love the arts. Like my family will tell you, I am not the artist in the family. I have probably very little gifts and abilities in the arts, but I love the arts. Because not dissimilar from my real passion, which is like sports, arts have a way of cutting across culture. They have a way of cutting through ethnic, demographic, socio divides. Like they just kind of blaze through it. They cut across language. They cut across all kinds of barriers. And so that's the reason I love the arts. They're a great medium to be able to share truth. And in our context, the truth of Christ. Allegory is a phenomenal tool within the set of the arts to be able to communicate really complex ideas that are symbolic, that are actions or truths that are generalized about the human experience. Christian allegory is absolutely no different than that, right? You guys, yes, okay, good. I wasn't getting responsiveness, so I was kind of like, yeah, Christian allegory is kind of the same way. So whether characters, events, objects represent really abstract ideas and can cut through, frankly, fairly an unarming way to be able to illustrate truths of God, truths of Christ, divine truths. So today's message is really meant to be an example of that. And we'll get into it a little bit later. But my hope today is that we'll see or present an illustration of a song and a band, to be honest, by extension it's the band, that seek to proactively use faith and biblical truths and allegory, frankly, more specifically, to be able to share Christ's truths with the world. Now, this goes across all kinds of different mediums. So books, obviously, allegory is a great tool. So if you're ever looking for a Christian book with great allegory, anything basically written by C.S. Lewis, Screwtape Letters, the Chronicles of Narnia series, The Hobbit, J.R. Tolkien, if you're going to go way back, John Bunyan's The Pilgrim's Progress, even characters within books can be really great examples where authors are able to carve out Christian truths. Some of my favorite is Laven from Anna Karenina. I love that character. Jean Valjean in Les Mis is another character where you really can see Christ through. Kind of a lesser known as Marie Laure from All the Light We Cannot See, a story from World War II. Actually, it was Brian who bought me that book, and I fell in love with that character. We also see it in movies. Obviously, the movie Amazing Grace, the story about William Wilberforce, the original Superman movie, for some of you who are of that ilk, very clear Christian messages. More recent, kind of goofy movie, Evan Almighty. One that's a little bit has to be audience sensitive, would be, for instance, Shawshank Redemption. Very clear stories of redemption. The Matrix, The Book of Eli, the new movies of Dune, and of course, some of your favorites, The Chariots of Fire. Music, though, is not that different, right? I'll just rhyme off some of the contemporary songs that really have Christian underpinnings and allegory. One of my favorites, Carrie Underwood, Something in the Water, great song if you're ever looking for it. Paul Brandt, anything by Paul Brandt? Any outside of Dawn, does anyone know who Paul Brandt is? Yeah. Pretty much everything by Paul Brandt, but not everything, almost all of it. Song like Garth Brooks' Unanswered Prayers, or Bob Dylan, or Lenny Kravitz, Are You Gonna Go My Way? We're kind of going backwards in time. Bob Marley, Thank You Lord, and Redemption Song. John Legend, Preach. Kendrick Lamar, who is a little bit risque, but he has a really great song on faith. Some of you would know Lauren Daigle, who kind of like today cut across culture. You Say. Going way back, well, not way back for some of you, Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey's When You Believe, John Bon Jovi's Living on a Prayer, and Josh Groban song, You Raise Me Up. The reason I've made this is that there is a long history over the millennia. We can go back to Beethoven's Fifth, and where music is used to be able to expound or to share truths. Some really great truths. So, obviously, today I'm talking about U2. Unless you've been living under a rock, you probably have heard of the band U2. It is one of the world's biggest bands, both in terms of, I think they've sold like 150 million records, 15 albums, they've had like number ones, blah, blah, blah. Like, they're a very, very successful, well-known global band. Their history is well documented. For those who don't know much about them, it's a quartet. So Bono, The Edge, Adam Clayton, and Larry Mullins. They started up in the late 70s in Dublin during a period of Irish history which called the Troubles, right? The sectarian violence between monarchists and Republicans, and a really dark period in Irish history, which goes back centuries of it deeply rooted. Anyway, so they were formed and raised in that area, and that really kind of helped to shape their worldview and their understanding. Obviously, over time, their music has evolved. Really started in the British, Irish punk music of the late 70s, early 80s, have kind of evolved into electronic dance with rock. They have rock, they do ballads, but really have, like, I would say, a very broad sense of music. And frankly, little less known, though it's not very hard to find, very much a band that has Christian underpinnings. At least 3 of the 4 members are publicly known to be Christians. They certainly are not a Christian band. In fact, in some ways they have kind of denounced formal religion. But they are very much, for many Christians, symbols of integrating of art and faith and global engagement. A little known story about them was during the kind of when they were starting to get bigger in the late 80s, around the time when Joshua Tree, which this album came out of. The band actually almost dissolved. Bono and Edge were part of a Christian group in Dublin, and they really felt they were being called by God to serve in the church, and didn't feel that their music world and their rock band music and their Christian faith didn't reconcile, and were actually very close to kind of pulling it all apart and dissolving. And it was actually their manager who said, well, you've committed to X number of albums and 3 years of tours, and so I'm not sure what your God is telling you, but you have a contractual duty to continue with this relationship. That's a bit of a joke, but they really felt like they could bridge their musical abilities and their Christian faith and be able to bring them together. And so I'm going to stop on that point, and I want to encourage you that your gifts and abilities, whatever they are, can come together. Whatever God has gifted you, whether it is in the arts, like or this band, or if it's in something else, maybe it's policy, maybe it's writing, maybe it's in sports, whatever it is, those two are not irreconcilable. You can be a great whatever and a Christian and blend them together. If maybe it's writing law, and that you can really bring your Christian faith to the creation of law or the writing of law or policy, or in terms of social care, if you're taking care of people, that you can blend together your Christian faith or your ability to serve clients. The two of them are not irreconcilable. In fact, they should be. Going back to our teaching from John today, they're not in the world, but of the world. You bring those together. I'll finish this little kind of bit of an introduction with a excerpt from a 2005 interview Bono gave on comparing karma and grace, just to kind of give you a sense of, so you don't take my word for it, you can take Bono's word for it. So this is him talking about grace. It's a mind-blowing concept that that the God who created the universe might be looking for a company, a real relationship with people, but the thing that keeps me on my knees is the difference between grace and karma. And yet, along comes this idea, grace, to upend that all, karma. As you reap, you will sow stuff. Grace defies reason and logic. Love interrupts. If you like the consequences of your actions, which in some cases is very good news, the consequences of your actions, which in my case is very good news indeed, because I've done a lot of stupid stuff. The point of the death of Christ is Christ took on the sins of the world so that we put out did not come back to us, and our sinful nature does not reap the obvious death. Over time, the U2 has produced a number of songs that one could really look to. I'll just run off a few of them. Where the Streets Have No Name, Yahweh is another song. Grace, which is inspired by Philip Yancey's book, What's So Amazing of Grace. And if you want a really cool read the relationship between Philip Yancey and Bono, they have a really beautiful friendship. Same with Eugene Peterson, by the way. Their song 40, which is actually a rewriting of Psalm 40. And then, of course, today's song. I still haven't found what I'm looking for. So I'm going to this is the earliest version of the song. So this is from Paris in 1987 with a very young Bono. But I want you to kind of go back to where they were when they originally wrote the song. So not after 30 odd years of time, or almost 40 years of time have passed, but let's go back to kind of where they were.